Greetings. Walter Edward Williams was an American economist, commentator, and academic. He was the John M. Allen Distinguished Professor of Economics at George Mason University, as well as a syndicated columnist and author known for his classical liberal and libertarian views. He was born on March 31st, 1936, and recently passed away on December 2nd, 2020. And this is me just giving a bit of a dedication to him by reading some quotes from an article I found about him. So I became familiar with Walter E. Williams, I think about 10 years ago, coming out of my just lack of understanding in how a lot of things work, trying to find out more about the economy. I think the key part of this was I was teaching animation in a university here in Kenya, and I was developing the course material, and I was thinking, should I use this project that I've been working on the back burner since about 2007? Just it's been tying a lot of things in. It's called Carbon. It's now called Carbon. It's called something else then. But then to do that, I was thinking, I need to develop my own political system. I need to develop my own system of economics. I need to develop my own system of how things work. And I started looking at, okay, there's things in the world I'm not really too comfortable with, but I'm not too engaged or too deep dive into some of these things. But how does politics work? How do economics work? Why does this country do this with this one? At that time, I was already in my 20s, and I thought I had somewhat of an idea of how just the world works, like sociopolitics. Like, I think your average person my age at that time, who's just somewhat aware of the world, will have certain opinions. And many of them were kind of wrong, was very uninformed of certain things. And I got into actually researching things, and I think it was through Milton Friedman and finding about Thomas Sowell, then finding about Walter E. Williams. That was, I think, my pipeline to the first time I actually heard about Walter E. Williams. And he is somebody who has said a lot of very sensible things. And he's one of those people who I kind of think, okay, part of why I'm glad about the world today, and part of why, if you're watching the video version of this, I'm doing this speed drawing of Walter E. Williams from my Anyone But K shirt, which is Che Guevara, because at that time, I was like, oh, Che Guevara, this is kind of a cool kind of design. And then I actually looked into who Che Guevara was. And Che Guevara is a garbage human being by all actual ways of defining that term. I think your average person, if you just said, these are the things Che Guevara did, and you didn't mention that he was Che Guevara, people probably would not be wearing him on a shirt. But many people wear him on a shirt without understanding. Like, aesthetically, it's a good design. So I'm like, hey, let me offer other people that can put on these shirts that might not be as heard of, like a Walter E. Williams. And you see this in the black community, however you want to define that in the United States of America. They point out certain people in the black community who might have done some more negative things. Then you also have certain people in the black community that are focused on the positive things that they did, and they ignore the negative things. And this is just the way the world works. People choose what they're actually going to deal with and what they're actually not going to. And that's the same way I was, and technically still am. There's just a limited amount of time. If I dedicate myself to learn more about Walter Williams, if I dedicate myself to do this speed drawing of Walter Williams, if I say I'm going to read this article about Walter Williams right now, there could be thousands of people worthwhile actually listening to that I'm actually not listening to, not reading, not drawing about at that time. So that's something I do understand. And that's some of the things that I learned with just the basics of economics, just praxeology, which is something that is in the Austrian School of Economics, which I would consider myself my current home when it comes to econ, especially financial econ. Just things in general. I'm going to be doing a series with my friend of mine on human action coming up soon, reading the book by Ludwig von Mises, which is an amazing book. And I think, to me, one of the most, if I was told to just pick 2 or 3 books to suggest to someone, I think human action has now added in there. And then Murray Rothbard's Man, Economy, and State with Power and Market is the second one. The third one, I think, would probably depend on how I feel. I think just off the head right now, if I had to put a list, I would put maybe Steven Pinker's The Better Angels Around Nature, just to give people some idea of this is how people work, this is how people worked in the past, things are getting better in the future because we have more knowledge. When I see people wearing the Che Guevara shirt, if I ask them, do you know what Che Guevara was about? Do you know the things that he did? They'll say, no. They won't know that and still wear it. The idea of who he was, of what he did, what he stands for, is something else. Or it's just a situation like in Kenya, here in Nairobi, Kenya, where I'm reading this, might be hearing some Hadada ibises in the background, like making some crows outside. But anyway, one thing with living here has made me realize deepened my actual knowledge into it. In the United States of America, I would see somebody. If you're in Pittsburgh, someone's wearing a Pittsburgh Steelers jersey, and you're like, okay, they probably like Pittsburgh. And then you ask them, doesn't mean they're going to know much about the team. Some of the people are just wearing it because they were just in that area, and that's just the thing to do because it's just clothes or just participating. So they don't necessarily know that deep knowledge. But often there's enough selection where people would actually wear something. They probably would not wear something they actively don't know about or actively dislike. Now, in Kenya, though, you'll walk around and there's a lot of people who just go to sokos, go to the markets, and the way some of those clothes are actually presented there, the vendors haven't gone and put in orders and researched their actual market and said, oh, we live in this area, these people like this kind of sports teams, like these kind of things, so we're going to make sure we get these kind of clothes so we can make sure we sell them. It's a rather indirect to consumer process that your average Kenyan walking around gets their shirt from, gets the shirts that they're wearing. I'll just give you an overview of it. Just the wondrous nature of just financial economy, how connected the world is, and how things work and why people do certain things. These are things that are interesting to me and are part of why I enjoy what Walter Williams has written and other people, and part of why I think he's somebody to be on a shirt because of the actual things he's given to that field. Okay, so in general, the main actual way the shorts get here to Kenya, to the store, to the person's back or to the person's body, that when I'm seeing them and wondering, hey, why is this person wearing that shirt, is it'll come to the coast in a container full of clothes and things like that, and it's mixed up, and then they kind of dump them out there. Then the truck people at the place look at, they say, okay, we're going to get these ones. Just put this container of clothes. We know it's clothes. Just put this container of clothes in the back, and we're going to take it to the actual Nairobi. Then they bring it to Nairobi, to the central market here. And then now, for example, some of the vendors who are selling clothes here in Kangemi, they'll go there early in the morning when there's a dump of the clothes, and they'll just sift through them and say, okay, I'll take this, I'll take this. And it's normally more like, I'll take 10 red ones. I'll take 11, I'll take 10 yellow ones. I'll take 10 white ones. All the different sizes and different kind of looks. They're not really paying too much attention on what's on the shirt because that doesn't really matter. They just need something to cover, something to cover whatever range that they have, and then it gets to the actual location in the market, and the person comes in and they say, okay, I need a new t-shirt, I need this, I just need a new t-shirt that actually works. I prefer this color red, I prefer this. Some people, it's not even I prefer that. Someone is just like, this is just the cheapest one I can buy right now. The prices in general are kind of the same. It's not like, oh, this one has much better fabric than this one. Oh, this one has a much more interesting design than the other one. People just go in and wear them. So oftentimes I'll see somebody walking with a shirt and they have no idea. They probably, some of the people can't even read the English that's on the shirt. You know, it's not that whole thing where like people in the United States of America get like the tattoos with different Asian symbols, like different Asian language symbols, so they don't understand what's going on, or like the Arabic language. No, not that. They just don't care. You'll see somebody who, some of those shirts could be a thing where it's like the Super Bowl is coming up, and before the Super Bowl happens, they print out maybe tens of thousands of shirts for both teams as winners because they just want to be first on market. Whoever wins after the game, they can get that first shipment out before they print out the rest. But if you have a situation where it says 49ers versus the Steelers, I don't know if that's in the same league, but 49ers versus the Steelers, they'll print out 10,000 of each. If the Steelers win, those 10,000 will go to the store and actually get into circulation in that direct market. But those other 10,000 that are still there of the 49ers as Super Bowl 25 winners, those aren't burnt. Those will be given to charity. Those will be given to these kind of things. Those are the kind of things that you'll find in these dumps of clothes. So you might even find some things like that where you're finding some kind of it's some kind of collector market of these limited editions that never actually were made. But I don't think it really works that much on this because, yes, I can probably prove that it was that original print, but I might as well just be able to use that design of the Steelers from that time and then reprint with the opposing team, and I could do that in a more new. So anyway, but the people didn't know about the Super Bowl. They didn't care about which team won. If I told them, hey, did you know the actual Steelers won that? They're like, what are you talking about? That's how it is for many people. Sometimes I'll see somebody who's saying Keene State, class of 1985, and they'll be wearing that jersey or a sweatshirt, and they've never actually left Kenya. They've probably never even been to university. But a place like in the United States of America, I'd say 7 out of 10 times, you see somebody wearing something emblazoned with some university, some college, some school. They likely attended that university, college, or school, or have a close relative or family friend who actually was at that school and they got that how. That how? Somehow. That how. That how should be a word. But anyway, so coming back to this, winding this down as I'm getting to the quotes, this is this part of what I'm talking about. This kind of explains why some of these things happen. Why is it that Keene State won't just do a direct on-demand printing. Why was it still able to do that whole situation where they can say, we'll print out 10,000 because we have 5,000 students, and the students might want to buy at least one for themselves, one for later, one for some relatives. And then it comes out to the end where it's like, okay, at that cost, at that price that we've done it, yes, it gets to the point where we still have 2,000 left, but that's okay because we can also give it to charity, maybe write it a tax write-off and all that. And that's how some of these things work. And it's not a waste to do that because that shirt still gets there. When somebody has a family reunion and it says, oh, we're actually going to have these shirts and we're going to wear these, but it might be low quality or it might not be something we wear that often, so we're just going to do these. These people already have this sweatshirt, already have this, but at the family reunion, it will be fun to wear this. It's a limited time thing. They wear it and then they give it out to charity later. Was that completely a waste because somebody else would wear that sweatshirt for 100 times, whereas these people wore it once and then gave it away to charity? No, because you give it away to charity, or you give it away somehow, some other way, where it goes out, where that gets into then somebody here in Kenya, somebody somewhere else is wearing that. And now that's not even going into the economics of actually how much it costs to actually do certain things. Why do shirts and things like that still get to the situation where they're actually handmade? There's no machines that actually do that. Was dropping the cost of the actual printing of the shirts and all the things, and the shipping of it, the shipping costs, all these things. Like, you have a situation where some of those sweatshirts might have actually been knitted and made in Asia with cotton and contents that were picked in Africa, here in Kenya, that were shipped to Asia, and then they were actually done there, sewn up there, and then it's shipped to maybe China, it's printed in China, and then it's shipped to a place in the United States of America. Then a place in the United States of America, they have the stores and they have the customs and all those things, and they sell them out there, and they do all those things, and then once they do all of that, that's given back to charity, and the charity thing is put back on another ship, and then that ship is shipped. The ship is swam. No, is floated. I don't know. What do they do? What do they do on the actual sea? What's the actual thing you'd call? Is it shipping? I know shipping is when you're actually going there. But do you say a ship shipped it? Like, yeah, you say ship. But then if you say even plane, people still say it's shipped. Like overnight shipping, they still say that when no ships are actually involved. Because some overnight shipping now, I guess an airship still kind of counts. So you can we should start calling land ships. We should start calling trains and cars land ships, because we call airships like a thing flying in the air. And when you actually go to space, it's also spaceship. So why is it on land? People don't say land ship. Anyone know that? I might look into that later. But anyway, so I'm not stalling. I'm going to get into the quotes. It's going to be a direct read of the quotes. I think I will read the thing. But anyway, the world of economics, when you actually look into the things, to me, it's a positive thing. And this is from my experience. The more I looked into it, the more I understood what some of the things are happening. I could have still been frustrated with certain things, and I'm frustrated with the people who are demanding certain things that are really just against the practical nature of the way things work. But just like with the Che Guevara shirts, people are wearing that without understanding who he was, what he actually did. But they have their own various reasons for wearing that shirt. Just like somebody here has a shirt of the Steelers having won Super Bowl 25 or whatever, and like they didn't win. They're not wearing it because they are like, I'm making a statement that he won. Just like when people say, oh, we want socialism. Oh, we want universal free this. They're not doing it because they completely understand what goes behind that economic system to actually get that to go on. They don't really understand that and then say, despite all those negative things, despite that not being true, I am demanding this thing because I just prefer this thing that's false, that's inaccurate, over the truth. And I think that's, to me, part of why I suggest people look into econ. That's why, for me, someone like Walter E. Williams is somebody most definitely I would suggest people actually get on. And I'll try to find some actual direct work of his to actually read. As I mentioned, I've mostly seen him do videos, do speeches, do talks, and heard about people who are inspired by his work. And he's been very well spoken of by Thomas Sowell, of who I've actually read many more books of. But they're talking about the same content. Once I started looking into these things and started understanding the basics of it and got the actual information, it reaffirmed some of the things that I thought about the world. And I think one of the key parts of this is because we are humans working with pretty much the same or similar enough parameter-wise machines of our eyes and our brains and our biology. And if we look at the same information, the same input, the same data, There's got to be certain things like our lived experience, the time we're actually arriving to that data, other biases and things that we have. But when it comes down to it, what is 2 plus 2 is 4. If it's literally just two things plus two other things, it's actually 4. That's actually what you come to. But then if somebody else is talking about 2 plus 2 is a different situation where it's like, okay, it's two women and two men, and then they come together. Yes, they make 4, but then you're talking about more things where they could reproduce, and then it could be 6 because they each have one kid and things. So people can say all those things, and so there's different things. But when you come to certain practicalities about economics, certain objective things, there's things you're going to come to the same actual results if you're actually dealing with the same things. So that is something that I thought was positive. But let's just get into this now. Thank you for listening this far. There will be links to a merchandise store where you can get the Walter E. Williams on the Anyone But K series and a bunch of other merchandise. That's one way you can help me out to make these things. And I'll be doing more of these where I do art that goes with it, but also have an audio version where you can get it. So wherever you listen to this, there will be links to the actual place where you can view it if you're listening to an audio version, and of course get to the actual store, because I am somebody who wants to participate in this financial economy. Just like everybody else out there, I do make decisions that I think are beneficial to myself in the long run, and I think that's a key thing to people, and I think this will be beneficial for you to get to know who Walter E. Williams is. Okay, so this is from fee.org, which is the Foundation for Economic Education. It's a good site. If you're not familiar with it, I think it's good to familiarize yourself with it. Okay, so 30 of Walter Williams's best quotes on liberty, rights, property, and coercion. And this is by Gary M. Gales. The subheading is Walter Williams is gone and will be widely missed, but his insights are not. So here's the little forward. So there's more forward. This is his forward. You already heard my forward, so just bear with me through this. Walter E. Williams, who many consider one of the greatest modern economists, has passed away at age 84. My connections with Walter go back to UCLA, where we both got our doctorates, though I was a bit later, and it was my misfortune that we did not overlap. Then I started writing popular articles in defense of Americans' liberty not too long after he did, which made me very aware of his writing. In fact, I once jokingly told my wife that I didn't like him because his articles were often too good a substitute for mine. That one, sorry, this is the aside, and I was talking about this before, when you actually find that, oh, I've thought about this, and you actually go read or hear somebody else wrote it and placed it in such a magnificent way. And that to me is part of why I suggest Steven Pinker's book, why I suggest Ludwig von Mises's Human Action and Rothbard's Man, Economy, and State, because it just puts the things that I'd observed about reality in such a succinct way. So you might think that's biased to me, but I think these things double check, and I've looked for people countering some of these things. And Steven Pinker, I think they've been some counters. He's focusing on certain things. But when it comes to Rothbard with Human Action, with Man, Economy, and State, and Rothbard and Mises with Human Action, I haven't really seen too many cogent actual pushbacks against the things that are actually said in these books. But anyway, so back to the reading. And I know lots of people with connections to George Mason University and stories about him. Because many were closer to Walter than I, the large outpouring of appreciation and endorsements upon his passing is better done by others. But I believe that I have something worth adding for those who didn't know about him, but whose interest in his work had been piqued by the powerful response to his passing. In 2016, I published a book titled Lines of Liberty, in which I curated what I felt were the best quotes of liberty I could find, but by those who had labored in the front lines to defend it. Walter was not included, like his best friend Thomas Sowell, but that was only because I had restricted my attention to people who had died, so I could consider the entirety of their work. Now, while I have not yet had time to do more than scratch the surface on his work, offering an initial collection of some of his most important insights may be the best tribute I can offer. I must say that after many years of thinking about liberty, I can get a thrill out of a well-made, ear-catching argument on its behalf. Reading Walter's words gave me quite a thrill, but it was quickly obvious that there was far too much inspiration and wisdom to fit in a compact space. So I limited my collection to very short statements on only a few of the core issues he dealt with. Consider my top 10 list so far in 3 different areas Walter thought deeply about as just the beginning of wisdom that can be found in Walter's work, and as an invitation to further consideration. Beginning here with On Property, Rights, and Justice. Number 1. My definition of social justice: I keep what I earn, and you keep what you earn. Do you disagree? How much of I earn belongs to you, and why? Number two, if one person has a right to something he did not earn, of necessity it requires that another person not have a right to something that he did earn. 3. Nothing in our Constitution suggests that government is a grantor of rights. Instead, government is a protector of rights. 4. There is no moral argument that justifies using the coercive powers of government to force one person to bear the expenses of taking care of another. 5. Government has no resources of its own. Government spending is no less than the confiscation of one's property to give it to another to whom it does not belong. 6. We don't have a natural right to take the property of one person to give to another. Therefore, we cannot legitimately delegate such authority to government. 7. Exercise of a right by one person does not diminish those held by another. 8. No matter how worthy the cause, it is a robbery, theft, and injustice to confiscate the property of one person and give it to another to whom it does not belong. 9. The better I serve my fellow man, the greater my claim on the goods my fellow man produces. That's the morality of the market. 10. The act of reaching into one's own pockets to help a fellow man in need is praiseworthy and laudable. Reaching into someone else's pocket is despicable. Next section is liberty versus coercion. Number 1. Government is about coercion. Limiting government is the single most important instrument for guaranteeing liberty. 2. Democracy is little more than mob rule, while liberty refers to the sovereignty of the individual. 3. The true test of one's commitment to liberty and private property rights comes when we permit people to be free to do those voluntary things with which we disagree. 4. In a free society, government has the responsibility of protecting us from others, but not from ourselves. 5. The essence of government is force, and most often that force is used to accomplish evil ends. 6. Economic planning is nothing more than the forcible superseding of other people's plans by the powerful elite backed up by the brute force of government. 7. If we buy into the notion that somehow property rights are less important or are in conflict with human or civil rights, we give the socialists a freer hand to attack our property. 8. Substituting democratic decision-making for what should be private decision-making is nothing less than tyranny dressed up. 9. It's government people, not rich people, who have the power to coerce and make our lives miserable. 10. The moral tragedy that has befallen Americans is our belief that it is okay for government to forcibly use one American to serve the purposes of another. That, in my book, is a working definition of slavery. Next section, protecting our rights and liberties. Number 1. Always be suspicious of those who claim their way is the best way and are willing to force their way on the rest of us. 2. People who denounce the free market and voluntary exchange are for control and coercion. 3. Economic planning is nothing more than the forcible superseding of other people's plans by the powerful elite, backed up by the brute force of government. And this is an aside by me that is a repeat, but I think does bear repeating. Some things most definitely do bear repeating and can cross across different things. All these things are all connected. Back to the reading with number 4. Politicians have immense power to do harm to the economy, but they have very little power to do good. 5. What our nation needs is a separation of business and state. That would mean crony capitalism and crony socialism could not survive. 6. The best good thing that politicians can do for the economy is to stop doing bad. In part, this can be achieved through reducing taxes and economic regulation and staying out of our lives. 7. If we care about our remaining liberties, we must at some point let politicians and bureaucrats know we will not tolerate further encroachment on our God-given rights to liberty. 8. The public good is promoted best by people pursuing their own private interests. 9. Most of the great problems we face are caused by politicians creating solutions to problems they created in the first place. 10. If we're ignorant, we don't know when the government infringes on our liberties. Moreover, we happily cast our votes for those who destroy our liberties. That was it for the 10. Now here is finishing up with what he has to say here. Walter Williams had a great deal of wisdom to offer me, and he passed that wisdom on to many. But there are many more of us who could still benefit from it. I hope the examples here touch a chord with readers and lead them to a further consideration of what he understood. Walter will be gone and widely missed, but his insights are not. So that's it. So thank you to fee.org and Gary M. Gales for spending his time to do this. What do you find disagreeable in what he said? I think the one thing I would object to would be here talking about the God-given rights, and that is something that I object to as someone who's a-religious, and they just don't really think that comes from God, but I think the concept in general where these are superseding, where these are exterior to the state, I don't think the state is a guarantor of it, as mentioned in the quote above. I think they're the ones who help protect that. It's people coming together to protect the rights that we already have, that we would have these rights without the state. You would have those rights without the God that you may believe in. Like, you don't only have rights because you believe in Allah and you're a Muslim and Allah is the one who gave rights. But then you have certain gods. That's why some of these monotheist gods, these more recent gods, say they created everyone. So even if you personally did not think that, oh, like this God created me, or you don't believe in that God, people still say, like I think the Christians will say, the God-given rights are technically still given to people who don't believe in. Like they say, yes, God gave me my rights, even if I don't believe he gave them, but they come from him. And that's a similar thing that goes on to the state now. People say, oh, America is the one who's going to guarantee democracy all over the world now. Well, yeah, America is the one who has given you democracy in this kind of sense, or given you, the Constitution has given you democracy in this kind of sense by copying America. Now your country has democracy, your country has freedom, now you have rights. The United Nations is now going to be the body where they're going to go around and guarantee rights and give rights to people. It's like, no, those people had rights anyway. You can have the government, you can have the United Nations, you can have people who are believers in certain religions and certain dogma, who think due to that belief they're going to do the actual actions to help enforce and help protect the rights that individuals already have, the rights that life forms already have. It is not because of a God, it is not because of a state that I have an expectation, a right to not be physically violated, to not have things stolen from me. But doesn't mean it's a guarantee either. A right to something is also, that's I think, something that people find problematic when I talk about this. I don't expect to be assaulted, but I also don't have like a technical right to demand that you don't assault me. If you assault me, I can defend myself. I don't really have an expectation that people want to do that. But in general, life forms, I think, have an understanding that they wouldn't want to be violated. So they find ways to violate other people in the least way, even if it's just from the complete private interest. Like I say, the public good is promoted by people pursuing their own private interests. Because it's also in your private interest not to assault me. Because you might win against me, but somebody else might see you assaulting me and then assault you. Or people who care about me might come and assault you. And this kind of things, it's everyone's public good is to reduce the acceptance of assault. And we see that. Human flourishing has been heading to that direction. That's why I suggest the Steven Pinker book, because you see how much worse things were in the past because we have a different idea of what the past was. And we're seeing a lot more horrible things right now. And then you hear things like human action, you hear things like, or you read things like Man, Economy, and State, and that kind of makes you understand that, yeah, people are doing these things, and we might be worried that if people just have more freedom and things like that, they'll object to the things that we do. Or why do people do things the way they actually do the things? Do we even have the ability to actually have an accurate history, an accurate understanding? In the past, when you look at history, it's been the people that won tell you a bit of the things that they did in order to actually be in that position, and then we take that for granted. But now it's like, okay, let's hear about the people that lost. Let's hear about the people that won and all the other losses they took. Let's hear about the different decisions, the cost-benefit analyses and all these things. Let's figure out that this is information that's out there, but it's not common sense. Definitely not common sense yet. It might be simple. I don't even know if it's simple to see it. That's what we'll go through. And that's one of the reasons I'm going to do this book, this reading of human action. And with that, or as this writer was talking about, like going through Walter Williams' actual content, saying, what am I going to break down? I'm reading or listening to the audiobook or reading the actual text from Human Action and trying to think, what do I actually want to say? And from the first chapter, the intro, and the first of the talk is just going to be the entire thing because there's no parts. I was thinking about taking quotes out. I'm like, no, I have to put this and I have to put that. So the first one is going to be the first 30 minutes of the actual book. I'm actually going to just read it down just to set up the rest of the book. Then from then on, might look at actually breaking things down. I might actually decide to do a full-on reading of it and just break down and have discussions with people. Because this is content. Once more people know this information, once more people know about the actual benefits of having a free market, of having voluntary actions, of the benefits of actual self-interest and individualism, I think the world will become a better place. Because individualism, me as an individual, it benefits me to be as useful to you out there as individuals that you'd find it like this video informative enough to click on it, to listen to it. Maybe it's my self-interest to get good enough at drawing and marketing so you can look at the actual image of the speed drawing and the whole series and then think, oh, that's actually good enough. He's edited this video, he's done the audio, he's put in enough thoughts, he's thought through these things where it's compelled you enough to convince you that Walter Williams is somebody you'd actually want to have on your shirt. And then you're like, okay, I'm going to get that merchandise. Then you give that money, and then that money comes to me, and then I use that money for other things. So in my self-interest, it is useful for me to be useful to you. And it is useful for you to be useful to other people. And that's the way the world works. That's the way this whole situation of all of us earthlings on this spaceship Earth are going to lead to a future of more human flourishing and success. And then there's many tools and ways that people can actually do this. I can do this by making content like this, where you choose to click on it. Or I could take the inverse, where I just find enough people and convince them to vote me into a position where I have control over the means of producing t-shirts, the means of producing information, and I mandate somehow that you have to listen to me. You have to buy the Walter E. Williams shirts. And that's not something that necessarily happens just in the private sector. That's something that can happen when you get control of governments, of the state, in the public sector. And I think that is where people go wrong. I'm not saying, let alone expecting, you to do things for me. I just don't want to have the ability for you to oppress me or for me to unduly oppress you. We're going to have competition. Imagine we're just two of us walking around in the wild. We come across a tree. There's one apple in the tree. We both want that apple. Neither of us have seen this tree, seen this land before. We can just sit there and start arguing about who owns the tree, who has the rights to actually climb it, get into an actual physical fight, and end up breaking our limbs and not being able to actually climb and get the apple, and then some bird or some animal takes it, rots, and we both lose out. Or another option is one of us climbs the tree, gets the apple, and then we bring it down and we share the apple. Because who knows, maybe next time you'll realize, oh, this person's pretty good at climbing trees. I'm pretty good at seeing apples. So next time I find an apple, instead of me trying to climb up and do it and break my bones falling off the tree, I'll call this guy. And then now that guy can be like, my eyesight wasn't that good. I'm not really good at finding out what apples are. So instead of me spending time looking for apples, I'm going to wait till you tell me where the apples are. And then now, in both our self-interests, it's been positive to actually have somebody else help us. And that's kind of the basics of the redistribution of labor concept. And we have unprecedented access to information. Information is one of the most powerful things ever. But just having access to information, like having access to this apple tree, is not the same as actually having the apple and gaining any possible positive nutrition from consuming that apple. Exposure is not the same as appropriation. So I want to get to the point where we can appropriate the information that we have out there, the unprecedented access to information that we have, to get to an actual appropriate understanding of said information. So if somebody hasn't heard of Walter E. Williams, or thought that he's dead, or wants to make some content like I'm making here, they go online and do an internet search. But depending on where they search, the information they get might be different. If you have Firefox with a DuckDuckGo server, and you type in Walter E. Williams like I did, you get a link to two of the articles, Washington Post and Winchester Star, about his death, and then Walter E. Williams' website, Wisdom of the Month. And if you're like a large majority of the people who spend time on the internet, where you've actually equated the term of internet searches as Googling it, you'll go to Chrome, and you'll type in on the Google search engine, Walter E. Williams, and the first thing you get is this. Walter E. Williams, 84, dies, conservative economist on, and you have to click to actually get more. But some might stop there. That might end the Walter E. Williams experience for many people. Because in the current socio-political climate in the United States of America, conservative has a negative connotation to many people. So there could be millions of people who just stop at this point. They won't even bother to actually click. So actually click the article. And with the New York Times, you have to sign up for an account to actually read it. I'm not going to sign up. Maybe I should. But right now, I don't want them tracking me. And also, there's certain biases probably against the New York Times. Like, I don't want to sign up for the actual site. It's not giving me any extra use. It might be useful enough. You see, that's something I have to make a calculation of. Maybe it's useful enough for me to actually do this free thing because enough people who listen to this content would be enriched by it by me actually going in. But let me read what was written here, at least from what I can see. Walter E. Williams, 84, dies. Conservative economist on black issues. Skeptical of anti-poverty programs, he was a scholar who reached a wide public through a newspaper column and books and as a fill-in for Rush Limbaugh. So that's what the New York Times selects to go with about him. Do they talk about the quotes? Sometimes say on black issues. Is he black? No, it's Walter E. Williams. Does that sound like a black man? Is this guy talking about black issues and against anti-poverty? So some of the negative things, Rush Limbaugh's that big guy on the right who's terrible. And I'm thinking about the general people that the New York Times listens to. How many of them actually aware of who Walter Williams was? How many of them would actually get to the point where they actually listen to the quotes that I gave you there? Are those quotes actually objectionable or are they not? What do you personally think? And it reminds me of that thing with Washington Post some time back when they had austere scholar where they talk about al-Baghdadi's death as terrorist, who was also a terrorist. But yes, he was also an austere scholar. I think Walter E. Williams might consider himself a conservative, but the other articles here was the Wikipedia, which is the thing I read in the start, just the Wikipedia entry. That seems to be okay. They don't mention that in there. They don't mention conservative as the start. Talk about classical liberal and libertarian views, which I think is what he would mostly identify as. Washington Post here has Walter E. Williams, libertarian economist and commentator. I think that's more accurate than just going with like the conservative. That wasn't, I think, his leading way that he would introduce himself. And then they go into his books, and they say people also search for Thomas Sowell, Shelby Steele, Larry Elder, and Milton Friedman. As I mentioned, for me, I think it was through Friedman, and then I found out more stuff about Sowell and the older entries that they had, and then I found out more stuff about Walter E. Williams. He used to do these things where he'd go into the actual places in the hood and do these kind of live kind of demonstrations of what's going on with the economics in the places. And it was kind of cool stuff where I'm like, these people have been out there doing things, talking about things, being out there communicating. I'm trying to do my small part, trying to do my part in all this. And I think you guys can do your part out there. You guys, gals, and everything else in between can do your part by watching stuff like this, sharing and supporting people who are doing content like this, and going out talking to people about Walter E. Williams and other people. So yeah, that's it. This was the second goodbye to the first goodbye, to the third goodbye. I don't know what it is. Anyway, till next time, goodbye. I'm gonna... I don't know if it can fly. I'm just gonna leave it out here and let it find its way.